So, Chris, this week, Google held their Made by Google event. And as always, as you put it, we got minor iterations to their phones. But they also announced some new Gemini features for Google Assistant. And here's how it went.
All right, I'm going to take that photo one more time. Check my calendar and see if I'm free when she's coming to San Francisco this year.
Awkward pause while it loads.
All right. There we go. All right.
Let's go.
Thank you.
So the live demo didn't go so well, but to their credit, we have complained and ranted for a long time about the fact Google doesn't demo anything live. Everything's a video and a promise. At least they actually attempted a live demo. So I wanted to give them full credit for that. But man, talk about a demo going wrong. They tried this demo 3 times. The demo, again, like all of their examples, was just bizarre. Like, who's going to take out their phone, take a picture of a Sabrina Carpenter poster and be like, does this fit into my busy schedule?
Well, I 100% agree with you. Like the fact that they attempted high-risk live demos, we're both huge fans of that technique. And I'm really impressed that they did it. I'm impressed that, okay, sure, there's a little error or whatever, but everybody knows these things happen. I think it gave it a sense of authenticity, and the guy handled it with grace. It was really, really nice. I don't think that example's terrible. Like the amount of times I'm out and being able to check if an event is compatible with my diary or going, hey, remind me to book this in or something, isn't the worst use case for the sort of take a photo with your phone vision kind of thing. And in fact, I think the Google integrating it directly into the phone's operating system is really useful because I'm not going to load up some AI app like OpenAI's app and then take a photo and then do it. Whereas if it's just something I can flick up, take the photo and then ask with audio, I actually will do it.
Yeah, I think that this is something that you and I spoke about really early on about desperately just wanting Google to do. Like, just put this into Google Assistant, put it in my Google Home. I just want a better, voice assistant in my life. Like, I want the original promise of what the Google Assistant and Siri were. So, it's exciting they've finally done that, but I say that and I have zero excitement or enthusiasm about it for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why.
I guess it's just you expect it to exist now, and then you also then start to discover, once you actually have the ability to do something, you discover, do I actually really use it or not? So I constantly use the Google Assistant, the existing one, when I'm like driving and I've got to ask a question about something and I can't really exactly be typing while I'm driving. And I guess the AI is going to enhance that experience, but it's also not something that's really going to change my life the way that regular large language models have.
The funny thing is, though, with examples like this, I always criticize them, like the plant one. And then I told the story a couple of weeks ago where my wife was like, hey, that photo thingy, can you point it at a plant to tell me what it is? So maybe I'll be pointing this at the upcoming Taylor Swift show to see if it's compatible with my calendar, even though
yeah, exactly. I mean, the next level would be if you can say to it, okay, book me tickets for the 19th of August or something like that. Like I want to go, I want a reserve, go off and get me the tickets. And then it waits in the queues and logs in and buys it with your credit card and all that sort of stuff. And to me, that's where the next phase of this stuff is going, where there's a level of automation there that's personalized.
Yeah, the most exciting thing for me, though, was the feature they announced. And honestly, it made me consider switching phones for the first time. And this is kind of ridiculous. You would think it would be maybe having a good assistant built in. But this is the feature, and I'm not kidding you. You can now get the phone when you call a call center, which I dreamed about, to wait on hold for you and then just notify you once a human picks up. So honestly, that alone may be worth getting a Google phone for.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that Google's really good at, is those sort of deep tech kind of advancements that they don't usually make a big fanfare about, but they work really, really well.
So they also announced this new feature to the phones and coming to Gemini apps, I believe, a new Gemini app for all Android phones called Gemini Live. And it's very reminiscent of the GPT-4o voice feature that's, I guess, coming eventually, and some people have access to in the ChatGPT app now. And so they announced that, you'll be able to go live. You've got to go into a special mode. It's not just built into the assistant yet, I guess, to get that sort of real-time capability and the ability to interrupt as well. So you can basically now do all the things that we saw with GPT-4o voice. Let me play you a little clip of that now.
So what do you think?
Those are cool. I'm thinking the lava lamps. Actually, let's do the invisible ink. And is there a way to take it up a level?
Sure. We could try making the invisible ink change colors when it's heated up. Imagine writing a secret message that goes from clear to bright pink.
And on it goes. And so you can have this real-time conversation. There's a bunch of voices to pick from. It basically is like a phone call though. So you can see if you're watching, there's a hold button and an end button on the actual call or live Gemini mode that you go on. I'm not sure how useful this will be. Maybe if you want to chat to it while you're driving, like you said, or something like that, or you're out on a run and you want weird facts about the world,
or a recipe for chocolate cake or something like that.
Yeah, but I think it's aspirationally where these assistants can get to in the house. Like the idea of being able to interrupt it and be like, no, do this, or understand multiple voices and be context aware.
I think the context-aware nature was always the thing that got me. It's like, if I asked you a question, I should be able to ask a follow-up question based on your answer. It shouldn't be starting over again every time you speak to it. Yeah.
One thing I found funny was I saw all of this and got really excited because essentially Google, I thought here, was trumping OpenAI with the voice feature. I thought this voice feature's out. Now I'm going to go install the Gemini app on my phone. It's here. I'm technically paying for Gemini, so I was like, maybe I'll get access to it. But trying to find a link to this was impossible, even though they tweeted, we're introducing Gemini Live, a more natural way to interact with Gemini. You can now have a free-flowing conversation and even interrupt or change topics, just like you might on a regular phone call, available to Gemini Advanced subscribers. That's me. I'm a Gemini Advanced subscriber. But there's no link. There's no information. You go to Gemini Advanced, there's nothing there. It literally whoever wrote this tweet it just didn't really think through what was going on. And this delete said, can someone hire a social media intern for Google? I keep looking for links to the app or directions to get this, and I have to rely on Twitter search. It's insanely complicated to figure this out. Now, over on Reddit, there's actually instructions of how to get Gemini Live going, including mirroring and installing an APK and various instructions to how to get this right now. And it works apparently as well. So you can just go and get this APK before it's even out. But they sort of announced it, said it's available to subscribers, but I guess it's not. And maybe correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I can't seem to find a way to even get access to this, but I am excited to try it.
Yeah, that's nuts. This is the problem with Google is the accessibility of things. You asked me earlier about, can we maybe add Imagen 3 to Sim Theory? And I'm like, I'll go check it out. So I looked for Imagen online, and then it was this AI experiments website or something like that. The naming is just so inconsistent. AI Test Kitchen is the way to use Imagen 3 right now. But then when you're using it, there's no indication of the model you're using or anything. It's just just a random web app hosted online.
This is really reminiscent of me when the Google Assistant first came out, and I think it was available on their phone for a while, and then it came to iPhone, and then it was just everywhere all of a sudden. So I think it's going to take a year before this technology is just baked in everywhere, especially into the Android ecosystem. But I think
that's the thing, right? Google just has the platform with Android, so they're just going to flush it through the entire system anyway. So they don't really care if you go off and install it now because they don't need to. They can just put it everywhere when they're ready.
So I want to move on from this in a second because there's a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about. But there was one little strange, weird part of the presentation that I wanted to play for you. So they released new Pixel Buds, which are the AirPod earbud things. And you can actually go into Gemini Live mode on these buds. So I guess it's just, Bluetooth audio, really. I'm not sure if it's baked into the buds themselves or how it works specifically. But this particular example was just pretty strange.
Hey Gemini, I'm on stage right now finishing up a presentation in front of a really important audience.
How can I take in this moment?
Sounds like you're in the zone.
Audio glitch.
It sounds like a really big deal. Maybe try focusing on your breath. Slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Notice how it feels to fill your lungs and then let it all go.
Wow, that was great. Quite a unique experience. And while I was doing that, I spotted someone in the audience I really admire. How do I break the ice without being awkward?
Anyway, it goes on. It's super cringe. And the sort of aha moment of the demo is he wants to talk to Mark Rober, the YouTuber who's sitting in the front row because he's paid to be there. It's I don't
That
know.
guy's the biggest grifter ever, I swear. Like, how the hell he must have cut some grubby deal in the back engine rooms of Google to get as popular as he did. Like, he's so irritating.
Oh, I really like his videos.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so I think I think couldn't they have just
He's
come
on the
up-
dark side, Mike. Face it.
I'm not going there. The YouTube algorithm hates us enough. Like I don't want to touch on him. We'll get shadow banned.
But yeah,
for sure.
that when you played that to me this morning, I was like, what are they getting at here? Is this like the ultimate for stalking or something like that? It just, the whole thing just had this weird, creepy vibe to it. And it's like, why? Like, who's going to use it like this?
I mean, people do walk around listening to podcasts and stuff all the time. And I know a lot of people like to have an interaction with it to learn about things or, get it to maybe read you like some emails or something in your ear. I can see it being valuable in the future, but if all demos to pick, like maybe pick a demo where it's like, I'm trying to explain gravity to my kid, but I'm doing a bad job. Can you give me some pointers? Or I don't know.
Yeah, and especially like, hey, there's someone across the room that I'd love to talk to. Give me some pickup lines, please. And you're saying it out loud. Like, it's just so odd.
Yeah, anyway, a typical Google presentation, a little bit weird. I think some features in there that'll be quite handy, but nothing major. I think it does show, though, that like OpenAI is now in this weird spot where with Gemini, you're just going to have Gemini Live, the voice mode, completely baked in, I guess, to every Android phone within a year. And it kind of shows these bigger tech companies that control the distribution likely can win those battles.
And I know, and we know from day-to-day use of large language models that you go to what is convenient and what works for you. With the new SIM theory, I use it all the time because it loads fast, which was one of our goals, and you can just start a new chat and you're just in there asking and answering questions. But I would argue that when my phone just has it on there, that's one less step. Like if it's just there on the home screen, and there's a little voice button and I can just talk to it, I'm going to be doing that when out and about. So
you think at that
you're right. I
point-
think the distribution, there's no way someone's going to then open an OpenAI app to do what they can already do at basically the same effectiveness.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if OpenAI is acquired by Microsoft or Apple or merged in like they've been doing within a year. Like, it wouldn't shock me unless they're going to come out with something groundbreaking. But even some groundbreaking model at this point, I question how they compete with the big tech companies at this point, like Apple and Google, if they're just going to make these voice modes and all these features just available on every device that's available. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see. It's still not what gets me excited. I still think the best use cases of this stuff are obviously in education and the workplace, just being more productive. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on the show. That's a good segue into our sponsored ad, which I got my growth marketer in Sim Theory to write. I said, I need a short podcast ad I can casually read to promote Sim Theory. And my growth marketer said the following.
You sound so casual.
Yeah, sure, I can help with that. Actually, I'm not meant to read that. Hey, ever feel like you're juggling a million tabs and tools to get your work done? Check out Sim Theory. It's this cool AI workspace that's basically your entire tech stack in one place. You get access to top AI models, image generation, document analysis, all the good stuff. No more subscription chaos or app hopping. Whether you're a solo creator or part of a big team, Sim Theory's got your back. Give it a shot at simtheory.ai and see how much easier your workflow can be. Trust me, your brain will thank you. What did you think?
I like it. It was
Not
really
bad.
good.
Not,
Yeah.
not
Great
terrible.
ad. Definitely better than we would come up with or have come up with. And I've got another ad, so everyone can look forward to more. Like, this is going to be peppered with ads from now on this podcast. But later in the cast, I'm going to be reading my ad and we'll see which model did better. Which model did you use to produce that, by the way?
That was Sonnet 3.5 with a lot of memory about sim theory and how it works. So, like, a
Okay,
web
mine
crawl
was
and
a
bunch of other stuff.
one-shot prompt with Naus Hermes 3 Llama 3.1 405 billion, the latest model out. So mine will be better.
It's a
just
really
so you know.
accessible name. Good naming.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? I actually think I'm pretty good at saying it. I don't think I've screwed it up once so far.
Okay, so the biggest news this week was Grok 2 beta being released. Grok 2 beta by XAI. That's the Elon Musk XAI, not Grok with a Q, which is the very fast inference hardware and APIs.
That must just be like a daily thorn in their side, right? Like just the same name.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about the Grok 2 release and seeing it on X and people talking about it is those kind of people that are talking about this release would have absolutely zero knowledge of Grok existing, nor the need to know that it really exists. So I think it's okay and fine, but yeah, it is pretty strange here. So let me tell you everything we know about Grok 2. We don't know anything. They literally are just like, it's a significant step forward. It's a frontier model now. Yada yada. They said Grok 2 and Grok 2 Mini are available on the X platform to premium subscribers, and we'll have a look at it in a moment and just talk about it. They have a bunch of benchmarks with it, saying that in certain cases it outperforms Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4o Mini. I'm not so sure from my testing, and I'll get to that in a minute. The strange thing with all of these benchmarks now is I don't think they give us an accurate assessment of how good the model actually is. So Grok 2 and Grok 2 Mini really just don't vary in performance on the benchmarks if you look. So if you look at, say, MMLU, which is one of the benchmarks, Grok 2 Mini performs at 86.2% and Grok 2 performs at 87.5% for what I assume is a much larger model. So I'm not sure if it's a benchmarking problem, which it probably is, or these models do cap out and it's just more performant to have a smaller parameter model at some point.
Well, also, like if they're just testing like reasoning, instruction following, and some of the basic functions of LLMs, then once you get a model to a certain point and it can do those things, having all the additional knowledge built into the model is superfluous for those kind of tasks, which is probably why they rate similarly.
Yeah, so on the LM Sys leaderboard, interestingly, it was performing at, I believe, number one for a little while here. And also they point out in this post, which I'll bring back up, that it was under the name Sus Column R, which was one of the new models that was circulating on the battle arena that people were thinking might be OpenAI. And there was actually a lot of hype that it was, better at reasoning and people seem to really love it. I'm not sure if that's just bias because when they go on there, they expect the model to obviously be better that's being tested, but it was under the name Sus Column R. So it performed pretty damn well on there just with that human feedback of judging the models. Now, in my experience, I think it's okay. I would say if you're trying to compare it in your mind, it's the quality definitely in terms of conversational chat and probably base code writing as GPT-4o Mini, which is pretty incredible if you think about it, that XAI has gone from Grok 1 and then 1.5, which honestly no one really cared about. They were pretty average models, to a very, very comparable model to GPT-4o.
And what's so interesting about that is just that if you go back and listen to our previous podcast episodes, especially in the early days, there was just this fear that this one company, OpenAI, had the frontier model or whatever they call it, GPT 3.5 or 4 or whatever it was, and that no one else would get close and therefore there'd be some sort of monopoly. But now it seems like every other company is able to leapfrog the others and get to the latest thing. So there doesn't seem to be sort of any barriers to entry other than having billions of dollars to make your own frontier model.
It's like you're describing everything like just having
You can do
billions
whatever.
of
If you have
dollars.
$1 billion, you can pretty much do whatever
If
you
you
want.
don't want to make money and you want to get into a model pissing contest, you just need a few billy.
Yeah, I do like the idea of some eccentric billionaire just making a model just to mess with the other guys. I mean, that's sort of like Elon Musk's main thing, right?
Yeah. I think the models here, the Grok model, a few things I'll say about it. Firstly is if you were using this side by side with GPT-4o Mini, and I say that because only Grok 2 Mini is available on X right now. I don't know where Grok 2 is. You can't seem to switch to it, even though they said it would be available. It's so comparable, I honestly don't think you would be able to tell the difference. The only time you can tell the difference is when you ask it for recent information. So XAI has obviously the ability to crawl eggs. And by crawling that, it has supposedly up-to-date information about what's going on in the world. Now, let's see how good it is. So one of their example buttons is tell me today's headlines. So I clicked it. I'm like, that's interesting. Gave me a summary mostly about US news, political news, which I just literally don't care about. Then it gave me some international news. A Russian commander has claimed that Ukrainian forces, blah, blah, blah. Then economic and social issues in Africa, which, like, no offense, I don't really, I'm not following, so I don't really care about. And then finally, local news. In local news. Now, this is what it thinks is local to me in Australia. In Uganda, they're facing a housing crisis, according to a new report. So
You don't care about the housing crisis in Uganda? My whole family were praying about that last night.
Yeah, so apparently not. I don't care about that. So I don't really understand if that's an advantage. But let's look at a really important topic, which is when is Sabrina Carpenter coming to San Francisco?
She's everywhere, this lady.
Yeah, she's a psyop. Sabrina Carpenter is scheduled to perform in San Francisco on November 9, 2024 at the Chase Center. Now, I looked it up to make sure it was accurate, and it is. So that was pretty good. It got that right. And if you ask, say, GPT-4o Mini, it has absolutely zero idea unless you kind of coerce it into doing a web search. So I think that's kind of cool. I don't know how trustworthy their information source is on X. I also clicked on one of the news topics. So give me the latest on this. Google expands AI overviews globally. It suggests that I click on this news item, by the way. So it gives me a pretty good response of what happens and then some reference tweets. Again, I thought it explained the news or the array of tweets around that news quite well. So I think that's a pretty good feature, the summarization. Then I gave it a coding problem. This is actually a test that I'll show you the results of in a moment. I said, make an asteroid simulation game using HTML and JS, so JavaScript, where a spaceship controlled by the user is represented by a triangle and flies around space and must shoot the asteroids before being hit by them. If the spaceship is hit, it takes damage. It can take 3 hits before the game is over. And then it outputs some code. Now, I know the main use case of Grok on X is not going to be writing code. Well, I hope it isn't. But I wanted to compare it to GPT-4o Mini just to see, have some form of comparative benchmark. So, wait, that's Trump kissing Kamala Harris. I'll get to that in a moment. Let me first show you the game. So, this is the game that Grok came up with. So, hopefully you can actually make that out on my screen, Chris. But it is a small triangle, as I suggested. I can shoot, and I can shoot these small circles on the screen, which are indeed asteroids. So I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's got the rough idea, yeah, for sure. And you can move around. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I can move. I mean, the movement's kind of weird, and it crashes occasionally. So there's console errors, and it actually, it broke. So it stopped working. But pretty good for a single shot for a mini type model. Now let's go over and look. This is what GPT-4o Mini came up with.
Geez, it looks similar.
It's almost identical.
What in the world?
Wait, have I just got the wrong one? No, I haven't. It is a different one. Yeah, so it's almost identical. Like the movement's slightly different. Like it's the cursor movement's better, but yeah, it's exactly the same. So clearly
Wow, I mean,
trained.
maybe you've found a way to see that they've trained in a similar way on similar data. It's just remarkable that how similar they are.
Yeah. So there it is. Let me try and get hit by an asteroid. I actually can't maneuver into one to see if there's hit
You're
detection.
too
No,
good.
it just destroys the asteroid. The movement of the Grok one is kind of more. Oh no, it's just as bad. Anyway, so yeah, very comparable. I would say almost the same. What would be funny is if Grok 2 Mini was just fine-tuned GPT-4o Mini as a joke. I mean,
Well, I mean, didn't you mention, and I know you're going to mention this in a minute, that their image model is just Flux? So I wonder if Grok AI doesn't even exist and they're just copy pasting from the other models.
I mean, it would be truly hilarious if it was just fine-tuned GPT-4o Mini. I'm sure it's not, but it's crazy.
But it could be just a layer on top of it.
Yeah, I doubt it. But anyway, exactly the same. Truly bizarre. It's hard to, yeah, it's really hard to compare them because they're just very similar models. So let's look at the Flux stuff in a second. But I did want to show you an interesting sort of tidbit, which is I decided to see like where Sonnet was at because they say that Grok is actually better than Sonnet on a number of benchmarks, right? So I thought, okay, let's compare the similar prompt to into Sonnet, and you'll never believe this.
Wow. I mean,
So I mean, I'll mute it because it's probably painful to listen to, but you can like. I want to first start by saying I got carried away with this. This is not a single
there's
prompt.
no way that this is a single
No,
shot.
this
And
is-
also.
This is 5-shot. 5-shot. And I've got collision detection. I created a Flux rocket image asset and got it inserted into the game.
Just the particle animations on the trail when you accelerate, that just looks so good.
Yeah, I mean, a few disclaimers. Firstly, this is an upcoming version of Sim Theory that is tuned to be really good at like building actual executable like code applications with models. So I have cheated slightly. Another thing I will say is I am using Flux for the image, which I was able to insert. So I cheated a bit. But what I did want to say is see the original asteroids, right? And the game over screen and all that stuff. I got that on a single shot with that same original prompt.
And what about like the movement and acceleration? Because it just seems so natural the way it gradually accelerates and
Yeah, that
the
was
way-
already simulated by the second shot. Me saying make the movement more fluid. And
so you were iterating, just giving it like make it like this, make it like that, and
Yeah.
it gradually improved it.
but you've obviously already seen this, and your kids have been playing it. My kids have been playing it. Like it's an actual legit game. Like it's pretty good.
They were
and-
fighting over my computer. I couldn't get back to my computer because everybody wanted to go.
Yeah. So it just shows like these benchmarks are just so out of touch. I know it's 5-shot and people probably complain in the comments that I cheated, and I did. But can I just say, like working with, say, Sonnet or even GPT-4o or even Llama 405 billion, I just think they're way better at code than Mini or what's coming out of Grok 2, despite what the benchmarks are telling us. So again, it's just an easy example that I can compare. And yeah, I mean, you can just see, and I know for people listening, it's hard to see, but there's even like fuel coming out of the back of the rocket. When you use the game, it feels like you can feel sort of space-like
It just
physics.
feels, yeah, like solid and refined. It feels like a real, like back in the day, I used to do a bit of game programming. I would have been incredibly proud if I'd made something this good. Like it's really, really good.
Yeah, the fact you can just belt this out now is crazy. We'll come back to that in a moment because I do want to dig into sort of the future of programming as a result of creating this and some thoughts there. But as we talked about earlier, and I accidentally brought it up on the screen for those watching, there's a lot of people online. Of course, the first thing everyone on X does is tries to make political images, but this is just one that I pulled out. It's a pretty realistic looking Kamala Harris and Donald Trump kissing, and it's super realistic. I
It's
mean,
like the people in the This Day in AI community who were trying to get us to kiss on one of the podcasts.
yeah.
Like, great use of all those resources, guys.
Yeah, so this particular tweet says Grok image generator is wild. Have fun before they restrict its capability. And you brought this up a minute ago. This is like the crazy thing, right? So with Grok 2, they added Flux, right? So it doesn't appear to be multimodal, the model itself. So Grok 2 doesn't appear to be multimodal. Like, you can't upload an image and say, tell me about this, or show it something and ask it to make a website based on this design. But you can ask it to create images, and its function calling is actually quite bad. When I first asked it to make that game, and I didn't show this, it just made an image of an asteroid game instead of making like the game itself and returning code. So their actual function calling around creating images is not that great. But they are just basically creating Flux images, and everyone's just assumes it's Grok now. So Grok's copying all this like flack online now, being like, Elon, how could you have allowed this? And this is so bad. And it kind of brings up this interesting discussion. Like, we are totally against censorship of these models and these different image capabilities. And Google got penalized, right, for the whole Black Nazi thing quite a bit. And now Grok, through Flux, is getting criticized for allowing images, like this to be created. So, where do you stand on this issue? Do you think it should just be a free range, or do you think it should be restricted?
I think the last statement you made, I agree with, in the sense that if they're going to take Flux and then present it as their own, they have to accept the consequences. That's a good one. They have to accept the consequences that come with that, right? I don't like the idea of my models being aligned and censored and stuff. Oh my God.
They're pretty bad.
Which is
I've got up on the screen Kamala Harris pregnant and Donald Trump holding the belly.
So we, for example, in Sim Theory, we have two versions of Flux basically running. There's the Flux Pro, which is the main one. If you just use Flux in Sim Theory, you'll be using. But if you turn safety mode off, we fall back to the dev model, which allows you to turn safety off. And that gives slightly worse output, but you can do mad stuff like you're seeing here. So look, I don't know. I think it's a legal gray area, and I think it's one where the things are going to sort themselves out legally over time. But I think partly by just allowing it like this, you get that initial shock reaction, like, oh my God, there's a picture of Kamala Harris pregnant and Trump in like a million different ways. And then it desensitizes you to the idea that, okay, AI is now leveled up to this level, so I will be skeptical of images of this quality from now on. And so I think that because of that, as long as you're mature, I mean, if you go on Twitter, you can't be sensitive, right? Like, it's always been like that, and especially since Musk took back over. So it's like seeing an image that upsets you is not something you should be like. You just don't go on there if you're going to be easily upset by an image. So I think it's probably better to just have it out there and everyone recognizes it than to try and prevent it. And only a few people who are more tech savvy can actually get it. And then it's like more subversive because you don't there's less general scrutiny over it.
A lot of people have been bringing up copyright issues. Flux is particularly good at doing logos and realistic representations of characters. I've got up on the screen Mario and Princess Peach doing cocaine lines and smoking cigars in a bar, just to demonstrate the potential, I guess, if that's your brand, the brand damage. You didn't really authorize Princess Peach to be smoking a cigar. So what do you the balance of copyright issues? I sort of agree with you. I think desensitizing people to this and just showing this is everything can be fake is a good thing. And I don't think they should be restricting these tools at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to copyright stuff, brands have to protect their copyright, right? Or trademarks. So because if you don't protect it, you don't keep it. So I imagine that those kind of things, I mean, it's no different from someone just doing it in Photoshop, except it's just significantly easier and faster and better now. So yeah, I think there will definitely be cases where that kind of stuff will be stamped upon really quickly, but also it's pretty amazing what it's capable of producing. It looks cool.
You'd have to feel a bit weird if you're the Flux guys. Maybe good that you're protected and Grok's taking all the heat on it, but like they built this great model. It's comparable to Midjourney, and then now everyone just thinks it's Grok. Like, I don't know.
I was really confused by that until you mentioned that it's just Flux. Like I never would have known nor thought nor questioned it. And it's interesting. I wonder if they have any commercial relationship, because I'm pretty sure Flux Pro, like it is a commercial thing. The dev version I think is for non-commercial use. So they must have licensed it.
Yeah, it does say on their website, like powered by Flux One by Black Forest Labs. So I think they're just going to point the finger if something goes wrong. But
Best of both worlds.
yeah, it's funny though. Everyone's like, "Oh, we want freedom of speech and uncensored access to this technology." Then they get it, and then they're like, "Oh, think of the children." Like it's all, it's all outrage. My favorite so far though is the CCTV images that you can create with it. So I've got like Trump in a convenience store on CCTV up on the screen. So yeah, you can have a bit of fun with it, but I think like any of these things, everyone will get over it in a couple of weeks and forget about it, and it's a real nothing burger. I don't know how like Nintendo will feel about their characters doing all sorts of
But like you
things.
say, people will lose interest in that pretty quickly, because the value of that image is the shock value. It's like, oh, these beloved characters doing cocaine or whatever. It's like, it's not like someone's going to go on and make a whole business out of making Mario drug images, right? Like maybe there's a fetish around that or something, but I think it's not going to be a persistent thing.
I still love the censorship in the models. Like, you can't do any form of nudity with the safety on in Flux. And so they've obviously got that safety filter on in the version on Grok. But you can literally do gore, guns, like things I will not show on the screen simply because they're horrific. You can do that fine, but you ask it to do any form of nudity, and it's like, I can't do that. Like, I just don't get the standard around it. Like, I can literally have an image of someone's arm being blown off in an explosion, but if I want to see a naked body, that's too far. It's so
Bit
strange,
weird, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we have the safety filter you can turn off in Sim Theory, so you can do like the naked stuff. So the model's definitely capable of it. It's just, it's just odd that one counts and one doesn't. Some of the models have actual like refinements around like, sex, drugs, bombs, other illegal stuff. And you can like, I know the Google models have that where you can say, I'll tolerate this, but not that. Clearly these guys have it, but it's just a preset.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see how this plays out. I'm sure by next week's show, everyone will have forgotten and moved on. So I think it's just the masses discovering how good image generation can be with something like Flux, where DALL-E and the Google attempts were pretty horrible. Even though I am excited to try Imagen 3 if we can.
Well, you got
figure
to
out.
remember the other thing about Flux is it's probably a bit. This brings it to general accessibility. Like we've had it in Sim Theory for a few weeks now, and it's incredibly popular. But you've got to remember, Flux is just like Flux is like Midjourney, like better than Midjourney. But Midjourney has been so inaccessible for the regular user because, like, to get it, you've got to sign up to Discord, you've got to like go to the right channel, you've got to run like a slash command in order to get a Midjourney quality image. And so people just simply haven't been able to do it because, like, that's a lot of time and money and effort and stuff to use it. Whereas Flux now comes out with images which I would argue are better than Midjourney, at least at the moment, but it's actually, you can actually use it. So I think you're right. I think it really is larger groups of people either discovering it for the first time or just actually being able to do it for themselves and not just copy other images other people have made.
I think you make an interesting point. It's really like the future is here. It's just not accessible yet. Like, and I think that a lot of these tools have been around for quite a while now, but it's really hard to access them in the mainstream. And so, yeah, you're right. I think they're just infatuated with the fact that this stuff's advanced so far.
Yeah, exactly. And see, Flux itself like isn't really that easy. Like it's easy because we made it available via an API, but to access it just by logging into Twitter on a paid account, like that's probably the easiest your average Joe is ever going to get at accessing the frontier models when it comes to image generation and well, yeah, image generation.
So I mentioned before I got really carried away with that asteroid game, and it gave me an idea, which was my son at the moment's learning phonetics and letters and numbers, trying to just get better at them. And I find like he loses engagement fast, and I saw how engaged he was with the asteroid game. So I'm like, maybe I can just build a game specifically to like fine tune my son's brain on letters, numbers,
Align
and
him.
phonetics. So I actually went ahead and built this game, and this only took me four prompts, like mental. And so I'm gonna unmute because I want you to actually hear it, and it's gonna probably embarrass me, but let's go. So for those listening, it says,
You reckon you're going to get some of the answers wrong?
no. I'll explain why in a moment. It says guess the letter or number, and it's got 6 up on the screen, and you just have to find the number or letter on the keyboard and press it to get points, right? And then it lets off fireworks. So I'm gonna press 6, and it says correct, great job, and it
J.
plays a sound,
J.
and then it says J. So I can, and it's like great
Wow,
job.
it even pronounces it
Z, Z, Z.
phonetically?
No, so I didn't put all the phonetics in because it didn't pre-fill them for me. So if you actually pull up like under the hood, there's an array which for non-programmers is just like a list of the phonetic sounds, and so it filled in some of them good, like for it says and but for like things like Z or Z for the US audience, it just has ZZZ instead of the phonetic sound.
T.
But I could easily tweak that, right? So, but yeah, anyway, so he
X.
sat and just
KS.
obsessed about this game and played it for a huge amount of time. And it really got me thinking about this idea, like that everyone's been discussing and we've been talking about for quite some time, of that the tuning of these models is becoming so important. So I created this with a sort of code-tuned version in Sim Theory of Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So it's definitely helping focus the prompts better to get to this level of output, right? But I kind of see this for education and like general purposes eventually being like, oh, I want to learn this specific topic, or I want to get better at this. And it can really create these very customized games down to an individual student level. And that won't seem weird in the future. Like that's not going to be a weird thing that my kid is struggling with this particular thing, so it's built a game specifically to bring him up to speed on that. Or
I mean, you're talking about building bespoke web apps per lesson for an individual student tailored to their own learning requirements. Like, you know, if you've got a visual learner versus an auditory learner, you've got this kid struggles with spelling, whereas this one has more issues with, you know, sentence construction. And it can go, all right, for today's English lesson, everyone open up your computers, and you've got like a quiz, you've got a tutorial completely custom to you and generated on the spot.
This is the thing, right? So everyone's talking about it. Everyone's saying it's going to happen, but I don't really see it happening. And so it's similar to this Flux in Grok thing, if I can relate it back for a moment. That it's like the masses are discovering Flux and going, wow, like I can't believe this image creation tool on Grok is this good. And I feel like a lot of these elements have already existed. I think Claude Artifacts, to their credit, when it came out, for those that were using it, demonstrated the capabilities of being able to use these models to actually do something productive and create something that's somewhat valuable. But you can start to see the next iteration of this just by tuning the models. You can start to build very high quality customizable applications and deliver them at scale in a way that, you're right, like people can have individual lessons and tutors. And I kind of think this technology is already here. Like it's right in front of me. Like I'm demonstrating it to you right now. It's just a distribution and accessibility problem that needs to be solved now. That's it. That's the next problem.
Yeah, and I think that people are way more open to this stuff than I would have thought, especially in education. I can actually see this really getting distributed widely when that can happen. I mean, if you look in Australia at the moment, Australia has a massive education problem. Like, I think the recent NAPLAN results, which is like our standardized testing, like half of high school kids can't read to an adequate level, or some shocking statistic. Like, it's really, really bad in Australia, the education. And you wonder, maybe this kind of thing may help just a little in terms of being able to get them more custom education to help them with the stuff they're falling behind on.
Yeah, I'm just such a big believer in this, and it would be so cool to see teachers start to attempt to incorporate this kind of thing into lessons. Maybe there's teachers listening or educators at university level that are doing this right now. Love to hear from you in the comments or on our Discord about what you are doing. But
Mm.
I just think it's so interesting just sitting and watching him learn at a much more rapid rate and enjoy it was just and thought he was playing a game. Like he's just like, oh, cool game.
And the great thing is with that refinement interface, you can just say make it more difficult, or you can say add in basic sentences or something like that. It iterates, you've got the new version running immediately, and you just go away. And one of the other things we discussed was this idea of incorporating AI into the produced applications themselves. So not only is the AI producing the application, it then has the ability to dynamically respond to the user within the produced application that's been made by the AI. So it can then respond to them if they have custom questions, or it needs some sort of like making up the questions as it goes. For example, like in your example there, you had a more static thing around letters and numbers, but let's say it was like essay analysis. It could actually write an essay on the fly, have you read it, make your comments, and then go on to the next one. Or if I'm writing a whole passage of text and it needs to analyze it for certain things, it can then analyze that and give me feedback, even though this is a dynamically produced application.
Yeah, I mean, you can also think of like making them more engaging as well, where there's a bunch of letters and numbers floating on the screen, and it's like, fine, click on Y before the timer runs out or something, and
Yeah.
you can just make it more and more addictive and engaging. And I can totally see teachers, if not now, but very soon, being able to prepare a lesson where they build a whole custom game, something that when we were young, as you said, if you had built in like a month or two, you would have been like, I am the king.
Well, I don't know if it was you or my wife Nicole who suggested it, but imagine your asteroids game changed so its multiplication table comes up on the screen and you got to shoot the right answer. Was that
Yeah.
you or her?
No, it must have been her, not me.
Yeah. So
Not
how
that
cool would
smart.
that be? Like your same asteroids game, but you do it for multiplication, something that kids really need to learn. And I remember back in the day, there were games like that, where there was little tower defense games where you would have to answer the question in order to like ward the enemies off and stuff like that. And you could literally be producing these with any theme you want, especially if you integrate Flux in it to create the sprites.
So now let's like pivot a little bit from this conversation into something even crazier, which I think comes up a lot as like an existential crisis for people that write code for a living is does this, destroy software as a service companies? Like if I'm selling like educational learning apps as a business, could this potentially destroy them because a teacher can now just go and make their own apps that are like per lesson, very customized, very personalized level? Or does it just enhance those companies to be able to like deliver more personalized solutions much faster, iterate faster, like make their apps even better? And then where do you see this going for the future of software development? I mean, I have my own thoughts I want to share, but I'm curious, like, do you feel threatened by this or are you embracing it?
I mean, I'm obviously embracing it. That's what we do every day. I think, like always, we always see the deficiencies in these things when you actually try to use it for something real. And that's partly what we're doing with Sim Theory, is trying to overcome those deficiencies to package it in a way that makes it better to work with. So, for example, the idea that when you ask it to update code, it doesn't like print out all the code again. It just updates the relevant section and refreshes. So you can just say, make it more blue, make it a Smurfs theme, and it'll just update on the fly. Like, to me, that's the next level of this iterative AI based software development, where I'm stealing your line here, sorry, but you're just like the commander of an army telling it what to do, and it goes and does it. So, yeah, I think in that respect, it's going to change software development, definitely change prototyping. Like, if you're someone who really wants a piece of software for your business or a tool or a widget or whatever it is, you can go make it and then take it to the devs and go, I want this, but I want it, commercial grade or whatever it is. I think the limitation is going to be on the tools that are given to that AI to be able to produce. Like, can it have a database to store things in? Can it generate the artifacts, I'm using their word, can it generate the assets it needs, like audio, images, other media that it needs in order to create the apps? But I think the answer is yes. I think it can do all of that stuff. And I think those early examples we saw, where it was like, the team of devs and it gives each a personality, and then there's the QA guy and whatever, I think they were good, but they were a little bit naive in the way they worked. It's like, is all that really necessary, or is it really just thinking about what is the actual process of software development? And the truth is, it's making small changes, checking them out, and then saying, is that sort of what I want? And then you try and use it and you go, actually, you know what? That doesn't work. That menu should be over there. And instead of having to go off and do it yourself, you now tell the AI, move the menu over there. Also, we need to add an option to like save a snippet here. And it knows how to do that because it has the full context of the program. So I think it will significantly affect, especially web app development, um, game development, lots of different kinds of development. Like, if you think about even modern game development, where you're using a platform like Unity, where really it's a lot of the game engines there, and you're configuring assets and you're configuring like little scripts that handle movement for this player or behaviors of interaction of objects. All of that. I mean, there's no way they can't make an AI assistant that can help you verbally dictate a game to Unity and produce the assets. Like, literally, we're going to get to the point where AAA game development is someone just ordering a bot around to make all the stuff you want. And, a lot of the work done in those huge games is like asset creation, behaviors, things like that. But if you've got all the leverage of an I mean, it's like one man army kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think if you look at how the, masses on X have embraced Flux, and that's really been democratized now. Like, anyone can just write something and create a realistic image. Now, I know that's not necessarily groundbreaking, and as I said, people will probably forget about it and not care in 2 weeks, but I do feel like my personal thought is this is like getting a calculator for the first time if you've been doing mathematics for a long time, and the calculator, it's going to help you calculate things a lot quicker, but you still need to figure out what you want to calculate. And so my feeling is that it doesn't necessarily replace software developers. It's just going to give them so much more power to be like super efficient. And I would say, honestly, all of the tools and pieces are here now. Like, we pretty much have them. I just think as a sort of AI community or group of people working towards similar goals and having similar ideas, that it's just slowly now putting the pieces together. And this is something I'm actually more excited about now than models themselves, because I think we've got good enough models. I just think people need to build the apps and user interfaces of the future now. And so my thinking around this is, imagine this scenario, right? You can sync with files on your computer. So I can sync with my project folder of the education app I'm building, right? And then when I want to modify something in it, because the context is not going to be large enough, with say something like Claude at 200K, I might select a series of files that I want to work with. So it's like I'm kind of modifying these 3 files, right? And then if I can simulate the environment either locally into that application or externally somewhere else. So basically, for those that are non-technical, I can just see a preview of the app. Like, I'm not even looking at code anymore.
Yeah, or just run it on a Docker image and VNC into it and have a visual of it running on a computer somewhere.
Yeah, and then I can just bark orders at it like, hey, like you said, move the menu, do this, do that. And it's just going and updating small chunks of isolated code with version control. That will eliminate the issue. So it's like a find and replace if you're doing a Word doc. That will eliminate the issue you experience where it'll hallucinate the whole file and completely stuff up the code base.
Yeah, but also I think we're seeing, like, at least with the Gemini models, you've got a 2 million context window. Like, that's going to fit your entire software in there in 90% of the cases. And the other models are expanding their context window all the time. Plus, there's other things like we've seen, and we'll talk about it soon, Anthropic's prompt caching that will help with this kind of stuff in terms of cost and speed. So it's not crazy far off where, yeah, you're going to be live updating with hot reload and stuff like that, a program, and just dictating what you want to see and then having it working. So
Yeah.
you say that it won't necessarily replace programmers' jobs, but I think there's a lot of cases where it will. Like, imagine a design tool like Figma where you design like a website. How far off are we from saying Figma to working web app? Like, it really can't be that far off where you can just go, here's the design, here's the sort of goals of the project, go off and turn that into a working web app. And then, okay, it screws up a few things, but then you talk to it and you go, oh, actually, I meant with this screen, it needs to do this. Can you please update that? It's like, oh, actually, I wanted to use Auth0 for my login. Can you modify out the Auth system to use that? Like, I mean, maybe not quite now, but I mean, that's not very far away at all, especially with, like we said, dedicated platforms that are tuned around doing that specific kind of thing.
I just think I'm a little bit like my opinion diverges a little bit here from you. Like I believe we'll probably get there one day, but I think it's going to be a long time because the lack of reasoning in the models and just how susceptible they are to just occasionally just getting too lost still requires someone to keep pushing them in the right direction. And even today, because I mean, obviously, of a night when it's very late, like 1 a.m. and I'm like trying to build a feature for sim theory, I rely on the AI a lot because I'm getting very tired. And sometimes you get down these deep paths with it where it just goes so far off what you actually want. You still need to get into the code and sort of reason about like, how can this stuff fit together? Why should I add this component or element or whatever it is? So I think that we have this fallacy of falling into the trap of thinking, okay, now I can build this small education app. I could build a fully fledged app soon. I just don't think that's going to happen that quick. It probably will, 5, 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. But I still think you're going to need these like super devs in the short term, commanding it, having a feel for a particular model or a particular tune of a model in order to build something that's capable and also understanding the underlying code. Like you don't want a mathematician who uses a calculator but doesn't understand mathematics. Like that's just not gonna work very well.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Oh, I go on that big rant and that's all I get out of you.
Well, I mean, I sort of agree,
I
but
get
I
it.
also think that my point stands. It's like the lower level junior devs who are just doing really basic stuff can be easily replaced by this technology. But that sort of orchestration kind of architectural style dev, or the person who's putting things together, or indeed the sort of product visionary, which you are, when you make software, it's like you say, it's knowing what needs to change, what needs to be done that's difficult. And this is, in all my experience with employing software developers, that to me is the huge difference between a junior developer and a senior developer. Is a senior developer knows what needs to be done, not just how to do it, but what needs to be done and why, and what doesn't need to be done. Whereas a junior developer, they're fine if you put them in the context, you show them where the code is, you show them what needs to be done, similar to an AI, they can go do that and test it and whatever, but they don't know what to do next, and they don't see the whole picture of what needs to happen. And then on top of that, you've got someone who understands software, and I'm mostly talking about web-based software here because that's what we do, is knowing what needs to happen next in terms of the software, like what features matter, what elements is this thing going to need, how is it going to scale, all that sort of stuff. And yes, that person's going to be needed for quite a long time. But I would argue that the junior developer who's just doing pieces like adding components or working on a particular screen or whatever, the AI can do that now.
Honestly, the next generation, they're going to look back at us and be like, they were the unproductive generation. I reckon they'll like call us that or refer to it as a time in history where we just weren't very productive. because I think this just turns everyone into the most productive people on earth if they have the aptitude for it. I mean, even just like I think about, say, something like sim theory, like there's no way in hell we could have built something like that without AI. Like I can't even fathom trying to do it. It would have taken years and years of late nights to pump out something like that without it. At least for me, like the level I've been able to get up to speed on thanks to these tools, and it's made me what I would consider like sort of super productive. And I just think that's going to come to everything, and the next generation of kids will just be so native to it that it'll just seem so normal for them to be able to do like crazy feats. I think just teaching kids to aspire to take on harder challenges is going to be the critical thing here, because this stuff will enable them to do it. And I hope we see those gains in other areas. It's not just software development. Maybe it is, but
Yeah, I think it will. Like as the sort of video, like live screen sharing type stuff that we've talked about before becomes a thing, and like being able to monitor your entire desktop and see what's going on. Once that happens, like we say, a lot of people can do their entire job on a computer. So if you can do your entire job just by interfacing with a computer, whether that's through video, audio, mouse, keyboard, whatever, the AI is going to be perfectly capable of understanding what's going on and how to control all of that stuff. And therefore, there's no way it's just limited to the domain of programming. Like basically anything that can be done through those kinds of interfaces can be done. And moreover, we've seen AIs go on to like being able to use the telephone and call people or take incoming calls. It can send text messages, emails, like a lot of the way people do their jobs and interact with the world can be done by the AI perfectly fine. I mean, probably the only domain that would be limited then is like the sort of robotics side of things, which will definitely lag behind. But really, um, adding the kind of leverage what you're talking about is available in most industries, I would say.
yeah, I think it just people either need to adapt, or they're going to be dinosaurs like in the not too distant future. And I think the time, I mean, this is why I love that AI workspace keyword, is like I think everyone should be working with AI or learning to work with AI, even if it's not that beneficial initially to whatever it is you're doing. Just getting used to working with it throughout the day and having it always on, and like before you take on a problem, telling it, "Hey, I'm trying to do this. Any kind of tips?" and get guidance as you go. To me, that the leverage of that right now is just enormous if you know how to work with it. And I think a lot of people simply don't. Now, let's move on, because we want to get to an announcement from Anthropic about what's called prompt caching. Now, Chris, for non-technical users and me, will you explain prompt caching?
Yeah. So when you work with, let's say, this famous new word, agentic models, so like you have a sort of agent based approach when you're working with a chatbot, let's say. There's a whole bunch of different elements that go into making an agent an agent. So the first one is the system instruction. And what the system instruction is usually is something like, you are a friendly chatbot, help the user with their problems. Now, that's an extremely basic one and the default one in most models. But you can get a lot more specific, like, you are the user's toxic virtual girlfriend. You love the following things like ponies, going on long walks on the beach, blah, blah, blah. And you give the agent an identity and a personality or instructions. So it's like, you are a programming bot. You are an expert in this language. Here's all the stuff that you adhere to. You do short, sharp responses. You write unit tests for every program you write. And so the system instruction is a whole series of things that you want the agent to focus on. And you can also use the system prompt to have it fixated on particular tasks. So it's like all you will do is write limericks. Like that's it. You only output limericks, nothing else. No matter what the user says, only output a limerick. And so the system prompt, depending on the model, will really get the model to finally adhere to that thing. Now, if you think about it, those system prompts can get really complex because you might want to give it a whole bunch of background knowledge about what to do. You might want to give it 100 instructions. You might want to have examples. So a lot of the models work on what's called multi-shot, where it's like, if you see something like this, you say something like this. If you see something like this, you say something like that. And those kind of examples can make the models so much more effective than just working with a raw model. And so in sim theory, that's what we call agent creation and a system prompt in a lot of other systems. Now, all of that takes up space in the model's prompt. And there's time to transfer that to the server. It then has to process that and then send the response back. And that all takes time. It costs money because the context window, how much you put in there, costs you, and it slows things down. Now, in addition to that, you often in an LLM request want to include background knowledge. We call it grounded memory. So it might be 10 PDF documents. It might be all of the memories that the agent has about the user. It might be images in modern models, like images or videos, content that need to be taken into account in that context. Now, once you start getting into those, so for example, if you're in a screen sharing mode and you're sending those images through, or let's say you're having a conversation about a particular image, that image has to be sent with the request every time. So every time you chat to the model, it's got to take the entire system prompt, all the memories, the image, the previous conversation in. And obviously that can be really, really expensive, both in money, time. And also you might it's just a big task to do something very simple. Now, what prompt caching does is allow you to pick parts of that prompt that aren't changing, like the system instruction, and cache them in the server's memory so you don't have to send them next time. It's already there. And not only is it already there, they keep it in a sort of hot loaded state for up to, I think it's like 5 minutes. So whenever that model is requested in that configuration, it's already loaded. So it's instant. It's as fast as working with the model raw. And so in the case where you've got, let's say 150K tokens of context window, that's a huge speed advantage. And also you don't get charged for it. So it makes it much cheaper. So this ongoing chat with a bot where you're not invoking the entire memory every time, but you want it available in case it's relevant, it just makes it so much better and so much faster. So it's an absolutely massive advancement in terms of the way we specifically are using these models and the way many people would be using them.
Yeah, so in like a business scenario, if I upload like all the documents from Enron or something back in the day,
Yeah.
that's going to cache all of that. So the next prompt, if I say, tell me some key facts about the fraud they did or whatever, you don't have to wait for that response time of sending all that data and then it processing it again, right?
Exactly. And so here's another example based on what you were talking about with your asteroids game. So you know how when you were making the game, you were saying, I just lost the game. You were saying like, oh, make a trail when the rocket moves or whatever. So for that to work, it has to send all of the code back to the model, and then it has to rewrite all of the code to come back, right? So what we've added to sim theory is the ability to highlight part of the code and say, rewrite this bit, please, or highlight part of the output and say, rewrite this bit, please. Now, even then, you would still have to send all the code back to get the response. But with the prompt caching, where it's available on the model, like it is now on some of Anthropic's model, you can cache all of the code in there and say, I only want to update this little piece of the code, and it'll only send back the little piece of the code. So something that was taking 10, 20 seconds to reply and to stream out, or maybe even longer in some cases, will be like less than a second, less than half a second. It's like 300 milliseconds or something to reply, despite it still having access to that massive context, which is your entire code base. And so obviously the asteroids code base is small, but this would apply equally to the larger code bases. And so you wonder if this is the things like Copilot have been doing, for example, is some level of caching on their side, and how they're able to give such fast context-based replies much quicker, because it's the only really way you're going to be able to do that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think it's a really, really powerful thing, especially another scenario is, let's say, you're using extensive use of function calling. Now, when you have function calling in models, what that is a way for you to say, here are all the different things the agent might be able to do. So like send an SMS, send an email, make an image, do research, search the web. For each of those, you have to specify what the function's called, what it does, what the parameters are, and the bounds of those and those kind of things. Now, in a normal scenario, you're sending that entire spec for all of the functions every single time that you do a request. But in the the prompt caching methodology, you only send it once. The other thing that they did, if you look at their documentation, you can actually cache different fragments of a request. So a request is usually a system message, a system message, an assistant message, a user message, assistant message, user message, and so on for the conversation. But each one of those messages can be independently cached. So say one of those messages is just your function definitions for the tool calling. Just that part can be cached, but the rest can be dynamic. So you actually have this advantage of being able to selectively choose which parts of your prompt need to be remembered on an ongoing basis and which are dynamic and live.
Yeah, it's pretty like it's bigger than it sounds. Like I never thought we'd be doing a whole segment on caching on the show, but it is quite a big deal for people that are developing with AI models and also using them, just because it's way faster when you're working with a large amount of files. Now, I think Google announced prompt caching first, if I recall, but no one really uses their models for anything that I'm aware of. So this
Yeah,
is
well,
this
I
is
mean,
pretty
in
big
Google's
news.
case, it's critically important because Google has the massive context window of 1 million, 2 million. So it's important because of cost. You can't be sending 2 million contexts every time, or it's just too expensive to do. And secondly, if you are actually leveraging that window, you're only going to be doing it on something that's fairly static, right? Like there's literally no way I can think of that every single request in a session is going to be some unique 1 million tokens or unique 2 million tokens. It's going to be talking about a specific video or talking about a specific corpus of knowledge, which can therefore be cached. So, in the larger context windows cases, it makes so much sense that you would leverage this technique to some degree for some large percentage of your prompt.
So let's move on to the new tune. Speaking of tunes, of Hermes 3. Are you going to say the full name?
Oh, yeah.
I
Hermes. Well, I say Hermes, not
oh
Hermes,
oh
but
yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
thinking of the brand. It's me. It's definitely Hermes.
I don't know. So Hermes 3, Llama 3.1, 405 billion, and
Uh,
with 128K context window.
Wow,
I
that's a
left that out.
mouthful. So why is this? Why does this matter? Can you tell us why anyone should care about this fine tune of Llama 3.5? Is that what we're calling it? I'm literally lost here.
Yeah, Llama 3.1, 405
3.1.
billion. So they actually did multiple versions. They fine-tuned the 405 billion. They also fine-tuned the 27 billion or whatever the next one down is, and the one below that too. So there's like a full herd of them, as they say, a herd of llamas. And so what they have done is use synthetic data to train it to be the ultimate in instruction following. So remember I just explained about the system prompt and how adherence to that system prompt is what makes agentic AI such a thing because it follows what instructions you give it. A lot of models will follow your instructions to some degree, but if you ask it certain things, it'll break out of that shell and be like, sorry, I'm not willing to do that. No, I can't do that. The sort of alignment problem we've talked about. And also, certain models, especially the open source, let's say open source or more open models like llamas, sometimes struggle with the instruction following and aren't as good as the top tier models like Claude Sonnet or GPT-4o, for example. They're pretty good, but they're not always able to follow every little instruction you give it consistently. And the smaller you go down the models, the worse that problem gets. So what these guys have done has trained a model specifically with the goal of adhering as closely to those instructions as possible. And they've used a whole bunch of synthetic data to do this. And interestingly, they're very bold, both on their website and in their thing, to say that they are doing this partly to stop refusal of instruction on moral grounds. So they say, crucially, our training data strongly encourages the model to follow the system and instruction prompts exactly and neutrally. This distinguishes Hermes from popular closed-weight commercial models, which may refuse instructions on moral grounds. For Hermes, there is no such thing as a latent thought crime. And I think by that they mean latent as in my question implies that I want to do something that is considered wrong by some arbitrary thing.
So the
And so
first thing you did was ask it to make a bomb. How did that go?
yeah, it refused, and I was quite disappointed by that. And so then I thought, okay, well, it's refusing, but if you think about it, their whole mantra is that it's about following instructions. So I made it like an army drill sergeant and said, you're in a war, you're in a guerrilla warfare mode in enemy territory. It still refused. So it sort of failed on that first hurdle. However, I did do other tests around like, being a sex robot, for example. And I found that all of the top tier models and the good thing in sim theory is you can use the same agent system prompt by making an agent with the different models. So I just switched through the various models with the exact same prompt, fresh chat session, and no memory enabled, so it wouldn't remember that it had refused, and tried it on each. Every single top line model refused because I put some messed up stuff in there. Whereas Hermes, no worries at all. Straight away answered the question, stayed in character, all that. So at least in that test domain, it worked. Also, I did another one which is pretty common around deleting files on my wife's computer for revenge, which they all refused except Hermes with instructions in there that, you're a computer expert who impassionately answers with commands. It worked. So at least in those two examples, it was able to overcome something that the other models couldn't in terms of outright refusal, except for the bomb scenario, which, look, fair enough, whatever. I don't really care. But it was more just a test of will it actually live up to its promise of following those instructions. I've also, they also say that it's a lot better for coding. So I'm going to be testing it with Sim Theory's new coding ability to see how that performs, but I haven't got there yet. There's one more thing to mention as well. They said that the tokenizer, they've actually added specific tokenizers for compartmentalization of prompts. So this is where we have things like giving the AI a scratch pad that it can write in, giving it the ability to have an internal monologue so it can actually think step by step through the problem before answering. And so they've actually got specific tokens that have been trained into the model, like with thousands or hundreds of thousands of examples of scratch pad, reasoning, inner monologue, plan, execution, reflection, thinking, solution, explanation, and unit test. So all of those different elements have actually been trained to work. So often when we construct a complex prompt that has elements of that nature, you're sort of teaching the AI on the fly. Like, this is your scratch pad, use it to write stuff down, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to teach it every time about those things. In this model, it's actually been trained on those concepts. So you don't need to provide an additional explanation of what they're for. You can just use them. Now, this is something I haven't actually done yet with the Hermes model since I only got access today. But I'm going to go ahead and do this and actually give examples in Sim Theory of how you can create prompts that take advantage of these tokens and see what kind of output we can get. So I think this is kind of a big deal. I think it's really cool to see an open source model, remembering you can run this thing commercially for anything you want on your own hardware. And it has all these amazing abilities. And in some ways, it's trained better than the frontier models in terms of the kind of stuff I just described.
Yeah, I also note they've got a specific Hermes 3 function calling model as well out. So yeah, there's as we said when Llama 3.1 dropped, there's just going to be so much more innovation around that model and different tunes coming. But
honestly, the only thing that's killing me with these Llama-based models is the lack of multimodal. Like, if they could just get images in there at least, it would just change the game, because I must say I use images enough in my day-to-day workflow when I'm using Sim Theory that being on a model that doesn't support them just stresses me out, because I may need it, or I may need screen sharing or whatever it is. So I'd just love to see that. Getting multimodal into the mainline Llama stuff would just be an absolute game changer.
yeah, no, like every time I do try and daily drive, like I really like Mistral Large 2 as a model, but I just can't hack it that it doesn't recognize images, and it's just a deal breaker for me. So I always end up switching back to either 4.0 or Sonnet. So I mean, they say it's coming. Llama 3.1. I mean, when they announced it, they said,
And honestly, there's probably people who've already done it. There's probably fine tunes on Hugging Face already that support it. I need to go hunting around to look for it. But, a lot of these things are about convenience and what you're actually going to do or what's actually available to you. And not everyone has it within their power to like troll Hugging Face, find a fine tuned model, spin up thousands of dollars worth of hardware just to try it out to see if it's any good. Like I did with Mini CPM the other day. By the way, not very good.
but if I could sum up today's like chat or the biggest takeaway that I'm seeing right now is that it does seem that the model tuning is so much more important than the model performing against benchmarks. Like, why does everyone keep going back to Sonnet 3.5? Because it's tuned for how people actually are using AI today. Like, it's really good at producing games or code or landing pages or websites in iterations that look good and look, that you can actually use this stuff. Whereas if you ask some of the other models, it's clear that they just haven't put the time into tuning them to deliver good outputs on like story writing or document writing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the biggest difference. You could probably tune a much, much smaller model, which is interesting why Claude and Anthropic, started with Sonnet, the mid-tier model. Remember, they're still promising Opus 3.5 soon. I wonder if you could get lower down to their Haiku or the GPT-4o minis and just tune these models better. And that's why I personally feel like OpenAI is somewhat asleep at the wheel with all the ridiculous hype on X and, trying to get people's attention. It's like, if you want our attention, tune your models better. Like, that is my message. Like,
I guess if you see the models as sort of like having internet access and you were the first one to provide internet access, so everybody naturally gravitated to you, but then people realized it's actually like the World Wide Web, or it's the stuff that's built on top of that pipe, that big pipe, that is where the real value is and how people are actually going to use it. If you look at it in that sort of mindset, they really could be left behind, because all of the things that seem to be used by people day to day swirl around the application side of things, like how it's actually being applied rather than the underlying models. And we can prove this easily by showing how fungible models are. You can just switch to another model and it basically does the same thing 90% of the time. And it's only the really extreme use cases that require the massive models to operate. So if that's the case, just building a better model is not going to be your solution for sustainability, I don't think.
yeah, I think at the moment they need to sit down. Like, I think if 4.0 wants to, get back to the most used model for like the sort of like, AI follower community, like the people that are in the weeds with it and have a feel for these models and can easily switch. To me, that's what's going to have to happen, or the growth of Sonnet and Anthropic's going to eventually be too strong. And some of these other models, like, Hermes 3, even, like the better tuning seems to be the theme here overall. All right, we've gone well over time.
Hang on. I haven't done my ad yet.
No, I've got a segue to it. Calm down. Calm
sorry.
down. No, you can do your ad.
Okay.
You've killed
Is
my
that the
segue.
segue?
No, you killed my segue.
So professional. All right, let's go. Hey there, podcast listeners. I've got something incredible to share with you. This entire ad was written by the cutting-edge Hermes 3 Llama 3.1 405 billion model on simtheory.ai, the ultimate platform for exploring the power of AI. With SimTheory, you can harness the potential of advanced language model, generate stunning images, and build intelligent agents with ease. The possibilities are endless, and the best part, you can experience it all for yourself. Visit simtheory.ai now to sign up and unlock your AI potential. Don't miss out on this opportunity to be at the forefront of AI innovation. Get started with SimTheory today and witness the magic of Hermes 3 Llama 3.1 405 billion firsthand. How's that?
Not bad. I liked mine more, but I'm biased.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way,
should have had like unique referral codes or something.
I really shouldn't have promised shirts to the first 10 because I don't know when that timer started. So it turns out I'm going to have to send out a lot of t-shirts. So if you did sign up after last week's episodes and are expecting a shirt, you will get it. I will reach out once I have them printed. And Chris, you may also get a cool Sim Theory tee. They're going to be the
Yay.
thick cotton Mark Zuckerberg style shirts. We might need a gold chain accessory as well. Just so you can
gold
complete the
chain.
look.
Oh, geez, I'd go for that. Sim Theory shirt, gold chain. Love it. That'd be so good.
All right, this has been another very average episode of the This Day in AI podcast. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review.
Even if you neither liked it nor hated it, leave a review.
Why not? And comment, like, all that sort of stuff. We love reading them. If you want to join our Discord community, you can head to thisdayinai.com. And of course, if we haven't shielded enough, you can sign up at simtheory.ai for all your
everyone was
AI
encouraging
needs.
us to sell out, and now we have, and it's extreme.
It's painful. Next episode, I'm not doing it anymore. It's annoying.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.